Hello, dear listeners. I invite you to hear a story about how, on January 2nd, the whole family set off for a barbecue. My mother-in-law said there was no room in the car, and I silently turned back to pack my things and leave. But when everyone returned home after the outing, the truth that unfolded left me frozen in place. The thick, greasy air of holiday cooking at the start of the year was suffocating. It pressed down on my chest. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, leaving me alone with a mountain of cold dishes. The thread of patience, stretched taut over the entire year, finally snapped with a sharp crack. When people's hearts are colder than a January wind, what can a submissive woman do to overturn this cruel game? For 5 years, I had been a daughter-in-law in a family that wasn't my own, and I always remembered one word: patience. There's an old saying, go the extra mile, and you'll find a whole new world. I believed that my sacrifices and compliance would bring me a peaceful family, my husband's complete love, and the respect of my mother-in-law. But on the morning of January 2nd of this year, the truth that confronted me was colder and more ruthless than the January weather itself. In my own upscale apartment, where my husband's entire family had been staying for the past year, the day began with noise and chaos. It was a beautiful day, and my mother-in-law had the bright idea for everyone to go out to a state park for a barbecue to change things up after several days of New Year's leftovers like potato salad and turkey. I had been up since 5 a.m., toiling in the kitchen. I marinated the meat, washed the vegetables, peeled every onion and garlic clove, and packed a large cooler with ice to chill drinks for the whole family. Everything I did was flawless, meticulous, beyond reproach. My hands moved deftly, slicing beef into thin strips, carefully marinating them in spices exactly to the refined tastes of my mother-in-law and my husband's younger brother's family. By 6:30, the whole family began to gather in the living room. My mother-in-law, Susan, was dressed in a bright red, stylish blouse. A pearl necklace shimmered around her neck, a gift I had bought her with my own money for her birthday last year. My husband Derek's younger brother, Paul, and his young wife, Kate, were dressed in trendy outfits. Kate clutched a designer handbag, a gift from Derek himself on the occasion of their son's birth. My husband, Derek, had styled his hair with gel, doused himself in expensive cologne, and wore a pricey tracksuit. They stood there, laughing and chatting loudly, discussing where they would take beautiful photos and how they would grill the steaks. No one even glanced toward the kitchen, where I was working up a sweat. No one asked if I was finished with the preparations or if I needed any help. I carried the heavy cooler out and set it by the front door, quickly wiped the sweat from my forehead, and with a slight smile, said to my mother-in-law, "Mom, I've got everything ready. Just give me 5 minutes. I just need to change, and we can go." Susan, who had been admiring herself in the mirror, turned abruptly at my words, her face suddenly darkened. She glanced out the window at the SUV parked in the building's lot, then at Paul and his wife, and finally, her cold gaze settled on me. "Paul's car is a bit tight. 4 adults and all this stuff will be a squeeze. Grace, why don't you stay home today and look after the apartment? It's the 2nd already. Tidy up the place, do the dishes, wash all the bedding and towels. It's too much of a hassle to be crammed in the car." I was stunned. The cooler filled with the food I had just prepared sat at my feet, a silent testament to the futility of my morning's efforts. I looked up at Derek, the man I shared a bed with, hoping he would say something in my defense. Just yesterday, when we were discussing it, Derek himself had said the 5 of us would fit just fine in one car. And obviously I had done all this prep work with the intention of going with them. But Derek avoided my gaze. He bent down to adjust a crease on his pants and, clicking his tongue, replied to his mother in a carefree tone, "Mom's right, Grace. You should stay home. It'll be more comfortable that way. It's crowded, and you might get carsick. You'll get tired, clean up the apartment, and then you can rest. We'll be back in the evening. I'll buy you a frozen pizza." Derek's words were smooth, without the slightest hint of embarrassment. Paul and his wife, standing nearby, covered their mouths to hide their smirks. Kate stroked her handbag and added in a shrill, cutting voice, "Grace, honey, when you're cleaning, don't forget to wipe down the glass cabinet in the living room. Our little one got his handprints all over it yesterday. It's cool in here. Take your time, do it all at your own pace." I stood there, rooted to the spot. They had absolutely no regard for my feelings. They treated me like a free servant, a maid who had done her prep work only to be cast aside so they could go enjoy themselves. Over the past 5 years, such humiliating and oppressive scenes had become commonplace. Sometimes I had to deny myself good food to leave it for my husband and his brother. Other times I had to hand over my entire salary to my mother-in-law for managing the major family expenses. And I had to hide the fact that this luxury apartment was my personal property to save my husband's family's pride in front of their relatives from West Virginia. But today, at the very beginning of the new year, this humiliation had pushed me past my limit. Strangely, I didn't cry. My eyes were dry. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't utter a single word of reproach. My heart, already worn down by their coldness and indifference over the years, finally turned to ice in that moment. A single drop had caused the cup to overflow. It fell without a loud splash, but it was enough to shatter all my illusions of a warm family. I nodded. My voice was so calm it surprised me. Okay. Have a wonderful time. My mother-in-law seemed very pleased with my obedience and submissiveness. She proudly picked up her purse and walked out the door. Derek carried the cooler of food. Paul and his wife followed them. The heavy oak door slammed shut. Their laughter and conversation faded down the hallway. I was left alone in the huge apartment, amidst a mountain of dirty dishes from breakfast and the lingering smell of grease. I slowly walked to the window and looked down at the spacious courtyard of the residential complex. Paul's SUV slowly pulled away, merging into the light traffic of January 2nd. They were gone. They had left me in my own home, treating me like a freeloader, a servant. They had no idea that the moment their car pulled away, I decided to single-handedly put an end to these pathetic days of endurance. I spun around and marched into the kitchen. I didn't wash a single plate. I threw the rubber gloves straight into the trash can. The plans for revenge I had secretly harbored. The evidence I had meticulously gathered over the past 3 years, it was time to bring them to light. I took a deep breath, feeling a powerful surge of life force fill my chest. The best revenge isn't about scandals or loud accusations. The best revenge is to strip them of everything they deluded themselves into thinking was theirs, to put them in the place they deserve, and to walk away with my head held high. I went straight to the bedroom and opened the closet. Today, I would no longer be the spineless wife and obedient daughter-in-law. Today, I would be myself again, Grace Miller, the only daughter of John Miller. I took off my old house clothes, saturated with the smell of food. I chose an elegant black dress and threw a gray cashmere coat over it. These were expensive clothes I had bought before my marriage, but my mother-in-law had forced me to hide them at the bottom of the closet, calling them a city girl's extravagance and wasteful. I sat down at the vanity, carefully applied cherry red lipstick, and brushed my long, dark hair, letting it fall down my back. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I saw a sophisticated, calm, and resolute woman. The traces of submissiveness and humiliation had completely vanished. I picked up my leather handbag, put my phone and a set of car keys inside. My personal car, a gift from my father for graduating from college, had always been parked obediently in the underground garage. My husband's family didn't know the car was registered in my name. I always said I had borrowed it from a friend, so my mother-in-law wouldn't try to claim it to show off to her relatives back in West Virginia. As I walked into the hallway, I ran into my neighbor, Mrs. Davis, who was taking out her trash. Mrs. Davis had lived in the building for a long time. She was a straightforward woman, but very curious about other people's business. Usually, seeing me bent under the weight of grocery bags or mopping the floor in the common hallway, she would shake her head sympathetically. Today, seeing me in nice clothes and with bright makeup, she widened her eyes in surprise. "Grace, is that you? Where are you all dressed up to go on January 2nd? The whole family left for a barbecue and left you here all alone. I just saw Susan with Paul and his wife. They were heading downstairs, looking so cheerful." I maintained a polite expression and gave the elderly woman a reserved smile. "Yes, Mrs. Davis. Something urgent came up. I have to go. Happy New Year and happy holidays to you. I wish you health and peace." With that, I gave the neighbor a polite nod and headed straight for the elevator. I no longer needed to explain anything. From now on, I wouldn't live my life looking over my shoulder at other people's opinions or gossip. Down in the parking garage, I got behind the wheel. The familiar smell of the leather interior enveloped me, giving me a sense of security and control. I started the engine, and the car smoothly exited the garage, merging into the stream of traffic on the still holiday-quiet streets. The weather in New York today was cool, but the New Year's lights still twinkled on the trees along the roads. I lowered the window a little to let in the fresh January air. My mind was crystal clear. My destination was an impressive office building in the heart of the city. In the basement of this building was a system of private vaults and bank-grade safe deposit boxes. The security here was incredibly strict, with absolute client confidentiality. 3 years ago, after I accidentally discovered my mother-in-law rummaging through my dresser drawer looking for my wedding jewelry, I became wary. I realized that the people living under the same roof with me possessed a bottomless greed. They were always looking for an opportunity to grab something, to cheat even their closest family. The very next day, I came here and signed a 10-year lease for a medium-sized safe deposit box. This box became my last citadel, protecting what was mine. After parking the car, I took the elevator down to the security area. A security officer in a sharp black suit greeted me politely. I presented my ID and a special client card. After passing through 3 levels of access control, including a fingerprint and retinal scan, I was led into a private room so quiet you could hear your own breathing. The officer left me alone in the room with safe deposit box number 89. I entered an 8-digit code, my father's date of birth. There was a dry click, and the heavy, solid steel door of the box opened. Inside was everything most important in my life, things my husband's family couldn't even imagine existed. I carefully removed a brown leather document folder from the box. Placing it on the table, I slowly untied the ribbon. Neatly stacked papers lay before me. The first was my marriage certificate to Derek, the piece of paper that had shackled me to a living hell for 5 long years. Next was the deed of title in the name of Grace Miller, confirming my legal ownership of the 3-bedroom apartment in the luxury residential complex that my husband's family had been shamelessly occupying. They were convinced it was a rental, and every month they demanded money from me, supposedly for rent, but in reality, my mother-in-law pocketed that money. Then I pulled out stacks of bank statements, which I had printed and had certified at several different banks in advance. This was the history of my cash flows, the sums I had saved from my salary and bonuses, the funds I had profitably invested long before my marriage. Finally, I picked up a time-yellowed envelope. Inside was my father's notarized will. My father, a man who had diligently run a custom woodworking business his whole life, had left me his entire estate. This included the apartment I lived in, a large bank deposit, and most importantly, a storefront property on a busy downtown street. Derek's family always mocked me, saying I was from a poor background, that my parents had died early, so I was a gold digger clinging to their son. If they saw this will, they would surely go mad with greed. From the bottom of the folder, I retrieved my deadliest weapon, a tiny silver flash drive. On it were audio recordings I had secretly made over a long period of time. My mother-in-law's insults and humiliations, Derek and Paul's conversations about plans to siphon off my assets, everything was recorded clearly and distinctly. I carefully checked each document, then neatly placed everything in my handbag. I closed the box, and the electronic lock confirmed it was securely fastened. Breathing a sigh of relief, I left the security room. Now everything was ready. This ironclad evidence was enough to shatter all their family's intrigues and hypocrisy to pieces. I got in my car, opened my phone, and found a contact saved as attorney. It was Mr. Michael Sullivan, a renowned lawyer in the city, one of the best specialists in divorce proceedings and property disputes. I had arranged a meeting with him before the new year. I pressed the call button. The other end answered quickly. A calm and professional voice came through. "Hello, Miss Miller. I'm waiting for you at the office." I gripped the steering wheel tightly. My gaze was fixed firmly on the road ahead. "Hello, Mr. Sullivan. I'm bringing all the documents. We can begin." The time to clean up the garbage in my life had come. I stepped on the gas, and the car sped down the asphalt, leaving behind the years of my youth, buried in darkness. The bright late morning sun of January 2nd streamed through the windshield, illuminating my face. The battle to reclaim my life from the hands of cruel and greedy people had officially begun. Leaving the vault, I drove down a street shaded by old linden trees to the office of my lawyer, Michael Sullivan. His practice was located on a quiet street. The building's facade was classic in style, elegant, and restrained. After parking neatly, I took my handbag, which now held my entire life and fortune, and went inside. The receptionist at the front desk gave me a dazzling smile, a polite nod, and escorted me directly to the senior partner's office on the second floor. Michael Sullivan was around 50. He wore an impeccably tailored gray suit, and his gold-rimmed glasses emphasized his intelligent and calm demeanor. They say you judge a person by their appearance. Watching his confident manner, I felt I could completely trust him with the most important matter of my life. Seeing me, Mr. Sullivan stood up and respectfully shook my hand. "Hello, Miss Miller. Please, have a seat. Would you like some black tea or water?" I nodded in reply and sat in the chair across from him. "Thank you. A glass of water would be fine. Let's get straight to business. My time is precious right now." Mr. Sullivan gestured for his secretary to bring the water and to close the door firmly. The office immediately became quiet, completely insulated from the street noise. I opened my handbag, carefully took out the brown folder, and placed it on the glass desk. I began to remove the documents one by one, arranging them in separate piles. This is my marriage certificate to Derek Orlov. This is the deed of title for the apartment in the luxury complex, registered solely in my name and acquired before my legal marriage. And this is the notarized will, prepared by my father, John Miller. Before his death, my father left me all his property, including this apartment and a commercial space on a central street. And finally, these are all the statements for my savings accounts and investments, made when I was not yet married. Mr. Sullivan carefully put on a pair of white cotton gloves and began to examine each document meticulously. His brows furrowed slightly as he reached the will. He nodded in approval, praising my late father's foresight in taking steps to protect his daughter. After finishing with the documents, he looked up at me. "Your legal documents are in perfect order. All of this is your personal property, acquired before the marriage or received through inheritance in your name. According to the law, your husband's family has no claim to this property. They won't be able to take a single brick of your home from you." I gave a bitter smile. If they were decent people who lived like human beings, I wouldn't have had to take this step. I took a deep breath, pulled the tiny silver flash drive from my bag, placed it on the desk, and pushed it toward the lawyer. "The property documents are only half the story. Mr. Sullivan, please insert this flash drive into your computer and listen to the recording. This is what I managed to record in my own home recently." The lawyer complied. He inserted the flash drive into his laptop and opened the single audio file. After a few seconds of static, the shrill and biting voice of Susan, my mother-in-law, came through with perfect clarity. "Derek, you need to think this through carefully. That Grace may be a quiet one, but her family had money. I did some checking on this apartment. The market price is around $1.5 million now. You need to sweet-talk her. Tell her to put it in both of your names for joint responsibility. And make her give me her salary. I'll manage it. You can't trust a woman with money. It'll spoil her." Immediately after, Derek's steady voice, my husband's, came through, laced with a chilling calculation. "Mom, don't worry. I've thought it all out. I'll gradually get her to transfer the apartment. As for our joint savings, I'll slowly move them out under the pretext of a business venture. I'll temporarily transfer it to Paul and Kate. Let them invest it in something, bring in some profit. You can't keep all your eggs in one basket. Money in our own hands, that's what's reliable. Grace knows nothing about finances. She won't find out." The recording ended with the satisfied laughter of mother and son. Mr. Sullivan turned off the sound. His face had become very serious. He took off his glasses, cleaned them with a cloth, and looked me straight in the eyes. "Miss Miller, I've handled hundreds of divorce cases, but such blatant and organized fraud, with the intent to divert assets, this is truly an egregious case. This audio recording is ironclad proof that your husband acted deceitfully, grossly violating his marital obligations with the intent to embezzle marital property. Furthermore, the constant pressure from his family and the financial control constitute a form of psychological abuse. You will definitely win this case, receive the majority of the marital assets, and fully retain your personal property. I sat up straight, my hands folded in my lap. My soul was now as calm as an autumn lake. No resentment, no pain, only a steely resolve. Mr. Sullivan, I want you to prepare the divorce petition today. Additionally, I request that you file a motion with the court to freeze all marital assets registered in Derek Orlov's name or to which he has access. I don't want them to take another single dollar earned by my sweat and blood. As for the apartment, I have my own way of legally evicting them. The lawyer nodded in approval and immediately picked up a pen and paper to sketch out a plan for further legal action. We spent nearly 2 hours going over every detail and anticipating all the possible crazy reactions from his family when the truth came out. After signing the retainer agreement, I stood up to leave. The afternoon sun shone through the window, lighting up the hem of my coat. From this moment on, the marriage certificate was no longer the shackles binding me. It would become the verdict for the bottomless greed of these people. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt my stomach rumble. I hadn't even had breakfast, having immediately rushed to clean. But I had no appetite now. My next stop was a major bank branch on the city's main street. It managed all my cash flows, and the joint account Derek and I had opened right after the wedding. At the beginning of the business day, January 2nd, the bank was not crowded. Employees had just returned from the long weekend, dressed in crisp uniforms. Thanks to my premium client card, I didn't have to take a number and wait in line. I was immediately invited into the VIP lounge. The branch manager kindly poured me a glass of water and politely asked how I had celebrated the new year. I offered a few standard pleasantries and quickly got to the point. Please print me a complete statement for all transactions on all my personal accounts, including the joint savings account registered to me and to Derek. I need to review some transactions in preparation for a new investment project. The bank employee quickly processed my request on her computer. Just 10 minutes later, a thick stack of papers with the bank's red seal lay before me. I took a highlighter and began to scan every line, every number. My monthly salary was regularly deposited into the account, and then almost entirely withdrawn to cover living expenses for the entire family of 5. Derek, although listed as a department head at a construction company, brought home next to nothing. They had shamelessly shifted the entire financial burden onto me. Suddenly, my eyes froze on one of the pages of the joint savings account statement. 4 months ago, right around the time Paul and Kate started talking about wanting to open a liquor store, but complained about a lack of capital, a strange transaction had occurred on this account. A huge sum, exactly $25,000, had been transferred. The transaction was initiated by Derek Orlov. The recipient's name was clearly stated, Catherine Orlov, Paul's wife. The purpose of the payment was listed as loan to sister-in-law for business development, interest-free, $25,000. They had dared to do this behind my back, using the online banking passwords I had entrusted to my husband to drain all of our joint savings and give it to his brother. It had happened exactly as his mother had instigated in that audio recording. Their greed wasn't limited to exploiting my labor. They were brazenly robbing me. I clenched my teeth. A chill ran down my spine, but my mind was clearer than ever. I had acted just in time. If I had delayed any longer, I'm afraid they would have left me without a penny. I looked up at the branch manager. My voice was firm, without a trace of confusion. Please, freeze all of these personal accounts immediately. Disconnect all linked mobile apps, cancel all current debit and credit cards. Then, open a brand new account for me and issue a new card. Transfer all my personal savings, certificates of deposit, and investment income to this new account. The manager was a bit surprised by my sudden request, but professionally adhered to the principles of confidentiality and the client's rights. The process was quick. My phone started buzzing with notifications about balance changes. The old accounts were now empty shells. The river of milk that had fed the laziness and greed of my husband's family had been officially dammed. I tucked the new, elegant bank card into the very bottom of my purse. As for that miserable $25,000, I would get it back through the court, down to the last cent. After finishing all my business, I thanked the staff and walked out into the main hall, heading for the exit. I had barely passed through the revolving glass door when I heard a familiar, shrill female voice from the direction of the ATMs. "What's wrong with this stupid machine?" Derek said the money would be in the account after lunch. Why do I keep trying to withdraw, and it just says the transaction cannot be completed? This is so annoying. I stopped. 10 yards away from me, standing irritably at an ATM, were Paul and Kate. Kate, dressed in a loud, colorful dress with that same designer bag I bought her on her shoulder, was holding a bank card and angrily tapping it against the screen. Paul stood next to her, smoking a cigarette. He reeked of beer. So, on their way back from the barbecue, they had stopped here to withdraw cash for bills and some shopping. They had no idea that the joint account had been frozen by me half an hour ago. All cash withdrawal operations were being flatly denied. An angry Kate turned around and accidentally met my gaze. Her disgruntled expression immediately changed to her usual fake smile. She tugged at her husband's sleeve, pointed at me, and quickly ran over. "Oh, Grace, honey, are you done with the cleaning already? And where did you get all dressed up to go? Can't sit still at home, can't relax?" We were just about to continue celebrating. Wanted to get some cash out to pay for some things and buy a few more items for the holidays. But the card Derek gave us isn't working for some reason. "Grace, since you're here, could you transfer us? Like $500? We'll get back in the evening, and Derek will pay you back." She spoke smoothly, without hesitation, as if my money was her own. Paul walked over too, spat on the ground, and backed up his wife. "Yeah, Grace, help us out. It's a special day. Kate wants to buy a gold chain for good luck. Like Mom said, we're one family. Why should we count pennies? It only sours the relationship." I stood there, arms crossed, and gave their insolent faces a cold look. The smell of barbecue clinging to their clothes made me nauseous. The submissive and kind daughter-in-law in me was well and truly dead. I curled my lips into a contemptuous smirk. "One family, you say? I don't seem to recall. I think this morning your mother and you said the car was too crowded and left me at home to clean and do the dishes. And now that you need money for shopping, you remember this daughter-in-law? Well, you know what? My money doesn't grow on trees for you to pick up whenever you feel like it. From this day forward, don't even think about getting another cent from me. You have hands and feet. Go and earn it yourselves." With that, I didn't waste another second looking at their stunned, gaping faces. I turned decisively and walked with proud, confident strides toward my car. Behind me, I heard the angry shouts of Paul and Kate, but I let them go in one ear and out the other. The big show was just beginning. I needed to save my strength to face the storm that lay ahead. After leaving the bank, I drove onto the main street. The sky on January 2nd was clear. A light breeze brought with it the coolness of the first days of the year. Having shed the financial burden, I felt a lightness in my chest. No more anxious sighs at the end of each month. No more need to skimp on myself to provide my husband's family with lavish dinners. I opened the car door, got behind the wheel, took a deep breath, and started the engine. My next destination was the most reputable real estate agency in the city, located on a central avenue. The 3-bedroom apartment in the luxury complex where I lived was an inheritance that my father had saved for his entire life and bought for me before he died. This place was once filled with my hopes for a quiet and peaceful family nest. However, since I married Derek, his mother, under the pretext of being bored back home, brought Paul's family with her to New York. They shamelessly occupied the best rooms, used my expensive belongings, and turned my personal space into a noisy marketplace. They didn't know the apartment was in my name and were convinced it was a rental, constantly berating me for it. Now, I decided to get rid of it all. A home desecrated by greed and ingratitude was not worth regretting. I parked near the office of Prosperity Realty. The director, a young man named Anthony, who had once helped a friend of mine buy a plot of land, immediately ran out to open the door for me. Despite the holidays, true professionals never turn away clients. I walked in, sat on a comfortable sofa, and got straight to the point. "Hello, Anthony, I have a luxury apartment at the Riverside Terrace that needs to be sold urgently. The paperwork is in order. I am the sole owner, no liens or disputes. I want to sell it quickly, this month. See if you have any cash buyers. Anthony quickly brewed some hot tea and poured me a cup. His eyes showed clear excitement. Apartments at the Riverside Terrace were always in high demand, located in a prestigious area, and the dream of many young families. Miss Miller, don't you worry. I have many interested clients for this area. Do you have the documents with you? Let me take a look to appraise it and prepare a listing with photos right away. I opened my bag, took out the deed of title, and placed it on the table. Anthony carefully looked through the pages, noting the square footage, floor, and window orientation. I clearly stated my terms. I'm selling it with all the built-in furniture and appliances. The buyer will only need to bring their suitcases. I'll set the price slightly below market value to speed up the deal. Anthony nodded in agreement. He immediately drew up a contract and arranged for a photographer to come the next morning to take pictures for the listing. Just as I signed the contract, my phone rang. The screen displayed the name Mr. Peterson, our building manager. Mr. Peterson was a meticulous, responsible man who knew all the residents well. I apologized to Anthony and stepped aside to answer. Mr. Peterson's voice on the phone was agitated. Grace, it's Mr. Peterson. Are you not at home? Your husband Derek is down here in the lobby with his mother and 5 or 6 other relatives from back home with a ton of luggage. They're demanding that security open the door for them. Derek says you left with the keys and is asking building management to open it with the master key so his relatives can go inside and rest. Can you please confirm this so security knows what to do? I gave a wry smile. Their audacity knew no bounds. First, they kicked me out of the trip on the pretext of it being too crowded. And now they've dragged their entire clan to my home to show off and live for free. I cleared my throat and answered Mr. Peterson in a very serious and clear tone. Mr. Peterson, listen to me carefully. This apartment is my personal property, registered solely in my name. I am currently in the process of divorcing Derek Orlov. From this moment on, I demand that the building management completely deny entry to Derek Orlov, his mother, and all their relatives. None of them should be allowed into the lobby, let alone up to my floor. If anyone tries to force their way in, please call the police for trespassing. Mr. Peterson was silent for a second, stunned by the news, but being an experienced manager, he immediately understood the gravity of the situation. I understand, Grace. You are the legal owner, and we will strictly follow your instructions. I will personally go down to the lobby and instruct security not to let your husband's group through the turnstiles. You can go about your business without worry. I thanked him and hung up. Returning to the table, I apologized to Anthony and said my goodbyes. The sale of the apartment was settled, but for complete security and to prevent any desperate actions from them, I needed a new lock. I opened my phone book and called Old Man Joe, a tried and true locksmith. I arranged to meet him at 3 p.m. at my apartment to replace the entire locking system on the front door. From the electronic fingerprint lock to the backup mechanical one, I demanded he replace everything with the most reliable anti-burglary system. At 3 o'clock, I was in the hallway on the 15th floor. Old Man Joe was already waiting for me with his toolbox. Seeing me, he smiled, greeted me, and quickly got to work. The sound of a drill and the clanking of metal filled the air. I stood leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching as my sturdy oak door was fitted with new armor. Every screw was tightened. My fingerprints were carefully entered into the new system's memory. In less than an hour, the job was done. Joe handed me 5 shiny new mechanical keys and explained in detail how to use the electronic keypad. I paid him generously, saw him to the elevator, and returned to my door. I placed my index finger on the sensor panel. A quiet beep sounded, and the deadbolt automatically retracted. I pushed the door, stepped inside, and slammed it shut. Now, my home was my impregnable fortress. Those outside, indulging in their illusions of false power, would soon get a cold shower of reality. After dealing with matters at home, I looked at the time on my phone. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. By now, their fancy barbecue picnic should be winding down. I decided to go and find them. I wanted to see with my own eyes the pathetic state of those who were used to living off someone else's money and were now cut off from their source of funds. I knew exactly where they usually went. It was a Korean barbecue restaurant by a picturesque lake outside the city. The roads on the evening of January 2nd were getting busy again. Streams of cars flowed back and forth, bearing the traces of holiday bustle. I slowly turned onto the acacia-lined road leading to the restaurant. I chose an inconspicuous parking spot under a sprawling old maple tree on the opposite side of the road, directly across from the restaurant's entrance. From this angle, I had a perfect view of everything happening at the entrance. I lowered the window halfway, inhaling the scent of charcoal and greasy grilled meat mixed with the wind, wafting from the restaurant's chimneys. The sounds of car horns and loud music from neighboring establishments filled the air. I took out my phone, turned on the voice recorder, placed it on the dashboard, and began to watch the brightly lit restaurant doors intently. I didn't have to wait long. About 15 minutes later, the transparent glass door of the restaurant swung open forcefully. Derek was the first to come out. His face was gray, and sweat beaded on his forehead. His mother, Susan, followed him, looking displeased and irritated, muttering something under her breath. Paul and Kate came out last. Stripped of their morning arrogance and cheerfulness, they now looked like deflated balloons. The sister-in-law stomped her high heels capriciously, constantly tugging at her husband's sleeve and complaining. They gathered under the restaurant's bright sign, right by the road. Given that they always spoke very loudly, I could clearly hear every word from my car. Derek shook a credit card in his mother's face. His voice was full of confusion. "Mom, look. I gave them 3 cards in a row, and they all came back with an error. The credit card is blocked. The debit card also says the account is frozen." The restaurant manager was looking at me like I was a con artist. I ended up having to call a colleague and ask him to urgently transfer money to cover the $400 bill. It was so embarrassing. Just awful. Susan, with her hands on her hips, yelled for the whole street to hear, "What kind of way is this to handle things, Derek? We go out for a holiday dinner at the start of the year, and you embarrass me in front of everyone. The money is in your account. You're supposed to manage it. How could it be blocked? Maybe that Grace did something." I noticed this morning her face was all gloomy. I suspected something was wrong even then. Derek grabbed his head. His pathetic state was obvious. "I don't know, Mom. I didn't change the bank password. We have a joint limit on the credit card. It's probably a system glitch at the bank because of the holidays. We'll go home, and I'll ask her to check." Paul, standing nearby, spat on the sidewalk and chimed in irritably. "What glitch? You'd better keep an eye on your wife. The card you gave my wife this afternoon, the ATM blocked that one too. If you keep trusting your wife with all the money, you'll end up on the street. That $25,000 you gave us, Kate already put it down as a deposit for our store's inventory. Where are we supposed to get cash now to help you out?" As soon as Paul said those words, Susan turned pale and slapped her younger son hard on the shoulder, hissing at him in a low but frightened voice. "Paul, be quiet. If Grace finds out about that $25,000, she'll throw a fit that will ruin everything. I told Derek to secretly withdraw it and give it to you for your business. If it had stayed in the joint account under Grace's control, we'd never get ahead. And here you are, yelling about it for the whole street to hear. If someone overhears, how am I supposed to deny it?" Their conversation was recorded, word for word, on my voice recorder. My heart beat faster not from fear, but from a deep sense of satisfaction. What a bunch of idiots, discussing such secrets, right in the middle of the street. They had no idea that every word they spoke was another nail in the coffin of their own audacity. Panicked by the lack of cash to get a cab, Susan started calling everyone she knew, asking for loans. She called her sister in West Virginia, loudly complaining about a sudden illness and an urgent need for money. But her sister, apparently well acquainted with her character, politely declined. Unable to borrow money, she angrily put her phone away and took her frustration out on Derek. "You're a useless man. Can't even handle your own wife. Now we have no money, the cards are blocked, and the relatives from West Virginia are waiting in the lobby at home. Call that Grace, tell her to bring money and pick us all up, and be quick about it." Derek frantically pulled out his phone and started dialing my number. Of course, I had blocked all their numbers earlier that day. He called and called, but to no avail. His face grew more and more pathetic. At that moment, Susan happened to look across the street. Her gaze fell on my car parked under the maple tree. She squinted, trying to make out the license plate, and then started pounding Derek on the back, pointing her finger right at me. Look, look, isn't that the car Grace drives? The one she says is her friend's. I remember the plate ends in 89. I think she's sitting inside, spying on us. That witch decided to mock me. With those words, seething with rage, she stepped into the road, intending to run across and confront me. She rolled up her sleeves. Her face was ferocious, as if she wanted to tear me to pieces. Paul, his wife, and Derek also looked over in my direction in surprise. I smiled coldly. All the evidence I needed was safely stored on my phone. I had no reason to get into a shouting match with these uneducated people on the street. I calmly turned off the voice recorder and saved the file. Watching Susan charge across the median strip, I unhurriedly pressed the button and raised the window. I shifted into drive and stepped on the gas. The engine roared to life. The car shot forward, leaving my mother-in-law frozen in the middle of the road in a cloud of dust. The performance at the restaurant was perfectly concluded. Now it was time to prepare for the main event, which would unfold in the lobby of our residential complex. As dusk fell, the city lights began to twinkle. The noisy daytime streets gave way to the bright glow of billboards and yellow streetlights. My car smoothly entered the main gates of the Riverside Terrace. The evening January breeze, rustling through the green plantings along the inner road, brought a light chill. Unlike the heavy, oppressive feeling I used to have every time I came home from work to my husband's family, now my heart felt light and calm. Everything had fallen into place. I parked neatly, checked my bag with all the legal documents one more time, and leisurely took the elevator up to the first-floor lobby. In my coat pocket were 5 new, shiny mechanical keys. They were the symbol of my freedom, the impenetrable wall I had built to stop those who greedily coveted the fruits of my labor. As soon as I stepped out of the elevator, a chaotic scene unfolded before me in the waiting area near the reception desk. About 10 adults and children in shabby clothes were sitting and lying on the sofas, surrounded by sacks of potatoes, crates of apples, and numerous bags. This was Susan's clan from West Virginia. They were chewing sunflower seeds, spitting the shells directly onto the gleaming tile floor, and complaining that the building management was too strict and wouldn't give them a key fob for the elevator to get up to the apartment. Several shirtless children were running and screaming around the flower pots, ignoring the disapproving remarks from the cleaning staff. This squalid scene only made me feel tired. Susan hadn't changed a bit over the years. She always loved to put on a show, arbitrarily turning my home into a free hotel to boast about her imaginary wealth to her relatives. I walked coldly past this crowd, heading straight for the reception desk. Mr. Peterson, the manager, was standing with his hands behind his back, sternly directing the security guards. Seeing me, he nodded in greeting. His eyes held a deep sympathy, the look of a man who had seen it all. "Grace, you're back. Look at this mess. Your husband's relatives have been causing a ruckus here since this afternoon. I clearly explained the rules and your requests as the owner, but they refuse to leave. They're stubbornly waiting for Susan to show up and sort it out. I've increased security, put 3 more guys on, to make sure no one gets to the elevators." I smiled gratefully. My voice was soft but firm. "Thank you so much, Mr. Peterson, and thanks to the security team. I know this has caused you a lot of trouble and spoiled the appearance of our lobby, but today I have to put an end to this once and for all. I need your help for just a little longer. They should be on their way." At that very moment, the automatic revolving door opened. My lawyer, Michael Sullivan, walked in, dressed in his impeccable suit and carrying his signature black leather briefcase. His confident and professional appearance immediately drew everyone's attention. I walked over to him and invited him to sit at a VIP table for residents, located a respectable distance from the crowd. "Mr." Sullivan opened his briefcase, took out a neatly arranged folder, and placed it on the table. "Hello, Miss Miller." "Hello, Mr. Peterson. I've completed all the legal formalities this afternoon. The unilateral divorce petition and the division of property claim have been filed. The motion to freeze the assets is also under review and will take effect at the beginning of the next business week. Don't worry, Miss Miller. All the legal traps have been set. They have no more chances to move anything. Mr. Peterson nodded in approval. He took a large sheet of paper from his own folder, on which a notice was printed in red letters with the round stamp of the Riverside Terrace Management. This is an internal notice I just had printed. It clearly states that Mr. Derek Orlov, Mrs. Susan Orlov, and any associated individuals are prohibited from entering the common areas and apartment number 1502, which belongs to the owner, Miss Grace Miller. I will have security posted on the bulletin board in the lobby and in the elevators. We must act officially, with documents, so they have no grounds for causing a scene. I looked at the notice, feeling a great strength building inside me. My meticulous preparation, Mr. Peterson's support, and the lawyer's professionalism had created an unbreakable wall. I leaned back in the soft sofa, folded my hands in my lap, and took a sip of the hot chamomile tea a receptionist had just brought. The sweet taste of the tea with a slight bitterness on my tongue was exactly like the taste of my 5-year marriage. I glanced at the wall clock. It was almost 7 p.m. They must have taken a bus or walked from the restaurant. The humiliation of being kicked out for lack of money, coupled with fatigue, must have driven them to their breaking point. I waited calmly. The stage was set. The audience had taken their seats. All that was left was for the main actors to arrive and play out their pathetic drama. Time dragged on slowly. The noise from the out-of-town relatives gradually subsided. They were tired and hungry. The atmosphere in the lobby became tense, like a drawn bowstring. The spider had long ago spun its web, and now only had to wait patiently for its prey to walk right into it. My calmness at that moment was my sharpest weapon, ready to pierce any mask of hypocrisy that Derek Orlov's family was about to put on. At exactly 7:15 p.m., a cheap taxi screeched to a halt at the entrance of the residential complex. The door flew open, and Derek got out first, followed by Susan, and the couple, Paul and Kate. Their appearance was so pitiful, it was hard to believe. Their clothes were wrinkled, their faces exhausted and sweaty. Kate no longer looked like the glamorous lady with the designer bag. Her face was twisted with anger, and she struggled to walk in her high heels. Susan, as soon as she got out of the car, launched into a tirade against the taxi driver, accusing him of deliberately taking the long way to rack up the fare, causing a loud scene right in front of the luxury building. They entered through the revolving door with disgruntled expressions. The relatives from West Virginia, who had been dozing on the sofas, immediately perked up and surrounded Susan. Reproaches rained down from all sides. "Aunt Susan, where have you been? We've been waiting since lunch. We're starving. You invited us to visit, and the security here won't let us in, chasing us away like dogs. We don't know what kind of fancy place you have here, but leaving guests in the lobby like this is just not right." Susan, surrounded by the crowd, her hair disheveled, turned purple with rage. She shoved aside the bags of homegrown gifts and shrieked at her relatives to shut up. Glancing around the lobby, her sharp, razor-like gaze landed on me, calmly sipping tea in the VIP area. Next to me sat the manager, Mr. Peterson, and an unfamiliar man in an expensive suit. The anger she had been suppressing since lunch erupted. Susan rolled up her sleeves and, pushing everyone aside, charged toward our table like a predator on its prey. Paul, Kate, and Derek immediately followed her, ready to tear me apart. "Well, look at you. You're the one who dared to block the cards and lock the house so my family couldn't get in? What's gotten into you? To treat your mother-in-law like this? I'm going to smash your face in," she screamed, raising her hand to strike me. But her coarse hand never touched my face. It was blocked by a strong barrier. My lawyer, Mr. Sullivan, had stepped forward, his tall and sturdy frame shielding me from my enraged mother-in-law. He adjusted the lapel of his jacket and gave her distorted, angry face a cold, piercing look. "Ma'am, I suggest you maintain your distance and watch your language. Threats, defamation of character, and attempted assault in a public place can land you in court. I am Michael Sullivan, the legal representative of my client, Miss Grace Miller. Any issues you wish to discuss, please address them to me." Susan froze. Her hand hung limply in the air. Derek ran up to support his mother and looked in horror first at the lawyer, then at me. He pointed a finger at me, his voice trembling with shock. "Grace, what are you doing? What lawyer? Have you lost your mind? Just because I didn't take you to the barbecue this morning, you got offended and pulled this whole circus with the cards and the locks, and now you've brought a lawyer. Do you realize how embarrassed Mom and I are in front of our relatives, airing our dirty laundry in public? Don't take it too far." I slowly stood up, brushing an imaginary speck of dust from my black dress. I looked directly into his frantic eyes and smirked, cold and sharp. "Dirty laundry? The door to that laundry room? I had it fitted with new locks this afternoon. You and your family will never cross its threshold again. I'm not here today to put on a circus or argue over a cheap dinner. I'm here to inform you that my divorce petition and the motion to freeze all marital assets have already been filed with the court. From this moment on, we will communicate in the language of the law." The relatives from West Virginia, standing around, gasped in astonishment. They began to whisper, pointing fingers at Susan and Derek. Paul, who was standing behind them, couldn't take it anymore and jumped forward. "Have you gone completely insane? My brother rented this apartment. He's the one who brings money into the family. What right do you have to throw us out on the street? What right do you have to block the cards? You think just because you have a lawyer, you can do whatever you want?" Mr. Sullivan didn't waste his breath on the ignoramus. He took a notarized copy of the deed of title from his briefcase and held it up for everyone to see. His voice boomed through the lobby, loud and clear. "I ask for everyone's attention. Apartment 1,502 inches, this building is the personal property of Miss Grace Miller, acquired before her marriage. The family of Mr. Derek Orlov has absolutely no ownership or usage rights to this property. Miss Miller's demand for the Orlov family to vacate and the ban on their entry are completely legal." At that moment, Mr. Peterson also stepped forward, pointing to the bulletin board by the elevator. "The building management has also issued an official notice requiring Mr. and Mrs. Orlov and all their relatives to immediately leave the lobby. Security is authorized to use force in case of public disturbance." The truth, revealed so quickly and mercilessly, left my husband's family frozen in place. Susan opened her mouth but couldn't utter a word. Her face turned from purple to a deathly pale. She turned to her son with a look of confusion and a silent question in her eyes. Derek was broken. He knew the truth about the apartment, but out of false pride, he had been deceiving his entire family for years. Now the cat was out of the bag, and he was exposed in front of all his relatives. This humiliation was more painful than 1,000 slaps. Derek suddenly changed his tactics. His eyes turned red. He stepped forward, clasped his hands in a pleading gesture, and began speaking in the pathetic tone he had always used to manipulate me. "Grace, I'm begging you, calm down. We've been together for 5 years. We have such deep feelings for each other. How can you be so cruel? I know I've been busy with work lately. I've been inattentive to you. Mom is getting old. She speaks without thinking. You're her daughter-in-law, be more forgiving. If you throw us out on the street in the middle of the night, how will we live? Please, withdraw the petition. I promise, from this day on, I'll treat you well. I'll fix everything." Crocodile tears streamed down his face. If this had been the old Grace, I might have wavered, given in to his deceitful, sweet talk. But the new Grace had a heart of ice. I lifted my chin. My gaze, sharp as a dagger, pierced his dark soul. "Feelings for each other? Aren't you ashamed to say those words? Where were those feelings when you and your mother were plotting to take my late father's inheritance from me? Where were those feelings when you secretly siphoned off all our joint savings, $25,000, and gave it to your brother for his amusement? Lower your hypocritical head, Derek. Your role as the model husband is over." My steely words were like a final, fatal blow, shattering all their lines of defense. The confrontation had reached its peak, and I knew that victory was mine. From this night on, a long road of retribution began for these greedy people. The moment my words rang out, a heavy silence fell over the vast lobby. The tense atmosphere gave way to universal shock. A few seconds later, like a dam bursting, a murmur of whispers rose. Neighbors passing by stopped, forming a ring around my husband's family. Derek stood as if turned to stone. All the color had drained from his face. His hands, just moments ago clasped in supplication, now hung limply, trembling. Susan's eyes were wide open, her thin lips pressed into a white line. She was speechless. I didn't give them the slightest chance to make excuses or play the victim. 5 years of patience had forged in me a heart of steel and a cold, rational mind. I turned to Mr. Sullivan and nodded. He took a thick stack of documents from his briefcase. These were the same bank statements with red seals that I had obtained earlier in the day. I stepped forward, took the papers, and threw them right at Derek's chest. The white sheets, evidence of his betrayal, scattered through the air and littered the shiny tile floor. I lifted my chin. My voice was firm, each word like the tip of a knife, cutting through their hypocritical masks. Pick them up, Derek, and take a good look. Open your eyes and read these numbers. $25,000, earned by my sweat and blood, which I was saving for this family, you secretly transferred to your sister-in-law Kate's account, under the guise of an interest-free loan. You thought I was a fool. You deceived me, squandered our marital property to feed your relatives, and now you have the nerve to talk to me about marital feelings? My words boomed like thunder on a clear day. The relatives from West Virginia, hearing about the $25,000, stared wide-eyed. Paul and Kate, standing in the back, shrank away, lowering their heads and trying to avoid the judgmental glares. Susan, realizing their schemes had been exposed in front of everyone, panicked and tried to justify herself. You're lying. My son earns money. And if he lent some to his brother for a business, what's wrong with that? You're the wife, and you're counting every penny with your husband's family. You ungrateful daughter-in-law. I laughed. My bitter laugh echoed through the lobby. Even in this situation, she was trying to twist the truth. I didn't bother arguing. I took the silver flash drive from my purse and handed it to Mr. Sullivan. He immediately connected it to his tablet and turned the volume up to full. The shrill, biting voice of Susan and the steady, calculating tone of Derek filled the space. Every word about their plans to make me sign over the apartment, to secretly move the joint savings for Paul and Kate. And all their contempt for me, it was all laid bare for everyone to hear. As soon as the recording ended, a veritable storm of indignation erupted. The naked truth exposed all the greed, cruelty, and immorality of my husband's family. Public opinion, always on the side of truth, now crashed down upon them. They had single-handedly destroyed the last remnants of their dignity. One of Derek's distant relatives, in a fit of rage, threw an apple she was holding onto the floor and, pointing a finger at Susan, yelled, "My God, Susan, what have you done? You bragged to everyone back home that your son bought an apartment and a car in New York, invited us here for the holidays, saying we'd live in luxury, and it turns out you're just thieves, living in your daughter-in-law's house and scheming to take her property. The Orlov family has never had such shameless people as you and your son. We're so ashamed. How can we face people now?" The neighbors didn't stay silent either. An elderly woman from a lower floor sighed and said with contempt, "You reap what you sow. I've seen how that dear Grace worked from morning till night for the whole family, didn't even buy herself new clothes, while the mother-in-law and the other daughter-in-law did nothing but dress up and go out. Ungrateful, greedy people like them belong in jail. Kicking them out of the house is too lenient." Susan, hearing the curses from her own relatives and neighbors, swayed and collapsed onto a sofa. She clutched her heart, breathing heavily, unable to utter a single word in her defense. Paul and Kate, seeing that things were going badly, tried to slip away toward the exit, but they were stopped by some of the younger male relatives, who gave them a piece of their minds. Seeing his family fall apart, Derek finally broke. All his masculine pride was crushed. He staggered toward me and fell to his knees at my feet. Tears and snot ran down his pale face. He reached out, trying to grab the hem of my coat. "Grace, I was wrong. Forgive me. 1,000 times, forgive me. Remember our 5 years together. Remember how I took care of you when you were sick. Please, withdraw the lawsuit. I'll make Paul return the money, every last cent. Don't throw me and my mom out on the street. After this humiliation in front of the family, Mom won't be able to take it. Have pity on me. I coldly took a step back, avoiding his dirty touch. I looked at the man kneeling before me and felt not a shred of pity. It was all too late. His tears now were caused by the fear of losing his financial support and reputation, not by remorse for the pain he had caused me. Our 5 years of feelings, you and your mother buried them long ago. God sees everything. Payback comes sooner or later, and you brought it upon yourselves. Let the law handle it now. From this moment on, everything between me and your family is over. Never appear before me again. I turned, nodded gratefully to Mr. Peterson, and then invited Mr. Sullivan to leave. Turning around, I walked straight toward the main exit. Behind me were Derek's sobs and the chaotic shouts of relatives, but I never once looked back. Stepping through the transparent glass door, I took a deep breath of the cold evening air. The darkness was left behind, giving way to the light of freedom that now illuminated my path. Leaving the chaos and noise of the lobby behind, I drove away. The night streets were noticeably quieter. A fresh January wind blew through the slightly open car window. The feeling of shedding the shackles that had weighed me down for 5 years made my body feel weightless. No one would ever again force me to wake up before dawn to cook and clean. There would be no more critical glances and reproaches. No more pinching every penny at the market to please people who knew no limits. From now on, I would live only for myself. I wasn't heading to some unfamiliar place. I turned onto a quaint old street in the heart of the city. Unlike the noisy new developments, an atmosphere of peace and tranquility reigned here. I parked in front of a shop with a wide facade, above which hung a wooden sign with the elegant inscription, "Miller's Fine Woodworking." This was my father's life's work, a place that held the warmest memories of my childhood. The shop was now managed by my Uncle Andrew, an old master carpenter and my father's sworn brother. At this hour, the shop was already closed, but I knew that Uncle Andrew often spent the night in the attic apartment out back to look after the inventory. I walked up and knocked quietly on the metal roll-down gate. A moment later, there was a grinding sound, and the gate opened a crack. Uncle Andrew peered out. His eyes expressed surprise and joy when he recognized me. "Hello, Uncle Andrew. I'm sorry to bother you so late. I need to talk to you about something urgent." Uncle Andrew hastily raised the gate and led me into a small sitting room that smelled of sandalwood. He poured me a cup of hot green tea and asked with concern, "What happened, honey? Why did you come in the middle of the night? Speak calmly. I'm always here to help. After your father passed, I've thought of you as my own daughter." I took the cup, and the warm steam warmed my face. I slowly told him everything that had happened today, my decision to divorce, and how my husband's family had been exposed in the lobby of the apartment building. After listening to me, Uncle Andrew's kind face darkened with anger. He slammed his fist on the table. "I can't believe it. When I first met that Derek, he seemed so quiet, so polite. I thought he was a decent man who would love and cherish you. But it turns out his whole family is a pack of wolves. It's a good thing you came to your senses in time and gathered evidence to protect your property. Your father would be saddened to know about this, of course, but he would also be proud of how strong and decisive his daughter has become." I smiled and looked at him firmly. "Thank you, Uncle. I came to you with a very important request. Starting tomorrow, please change all the locks on this shop. If my mother-in-law, Derek, or anyone from their family comes here, under no circumstances should you let them in or say anything to them. They are desperate now and might come here to cause a scene or ask for something. I've already put the apartment up for sale. As soon as I finalize all the paperwork, I'm going to take over this space and turn it into a bookstore cafe, just like my father once dreamed of." Uncle Andrew nodded decisively, patting his chest. "You can count on me. This is your father's legacy, and no stranger will dare to come in here and ruin anything. You go ahead and deal with the court case, and I'll look after the shop. I'll clean everything up, get it ready for the day you start renovations." After discussing everything in detail with Uncle Andrew, I said my goodbyes so he could rest. I drove to a 5-star hotel on the lakefront and checked into a luxurious suite to stay for a few days while the apartment was being sold. As I was checking in at the reception, the young woman in an elegant uniform smiled politely and handed me a small, sealed envelope. "Miss Miller, A little while ago, a man who identified himself as your husband came by and left this for you. He said he couldn't reach you by phone and asked me to give it to you personally. He looked very tired and dejected, and he waited in the lobby for a long time before leaving. I frowned and took the envelope. I didn't need to guess to know that Derek, with his last few dollars, had followed me all the way to the hotel. His stubbornness and cowardice always made him cling to the last, most ghostly glimmer of hope. I thanked the receptionist, took my luggage, and went up to my room. The hotel room was spacious, with a luxurious design in warm tones. I threw my bag on the sofa, sat down, and coldly tore open the envelope. Inside was a worn red velvet box, and a letter hastily written on a piece of lined paper. I opened the box. Inside was a cheap silver ring with an old-fashioned design. It was the ring Derek had given me on our first anniversary, when we were still in college. Back then, he had held my hand and sworn that even though the ring was cheap, it contained the most sincere and pure love, and that he would spend his whole life making sure I never wanted for anything. I gave a wry smile and picked up the letter. The uneven lines were full of complaints and pleas. Derek asked me to remember the past, blamed everything on his mother, swore to change, to cut ties with Paul's family, and to devote himself entirely to me. He was using an old relic to evoke pity, trying to manipulate the woman he thought still loved him. But he was wrong. Sincere love is incompatible with greed. It does not live in base calculations. The silver ring, once a symbol of young love, had now become nothing more than an embodiment of cheapness and falsehood. I slowly stood up, took the ring and the letter, walked over to the trash can by the vanity, and without a moment's hesitation, opened my hand. The ring and the letter fell to the bottom, forever severing all ties with a deceitful past. I went into the bathroom and soaked in a warm bath with a few drops of calming lavender oil. The grime, fatigue, and negative energy of the day were washed away by the streams of water. After my bath, I put on a soft silk robe, dried my long hair, and lay down on the soft bed that smelled of fresh linens. Outside the window, the lights flickered on the smooth surface of the lake. I closed my eyes, and a light smile of relief appeared on my lips. It was the most peaceful and sound sleep I had had in 5 long years. The humiliating past was locked away and thrown out. Tomorrow, when I woke up, I would breathe the air of freedom, ready to meet the new, bright, and proud life that awaited me. The bright morning sun of January 3rd filtered through the thin curtains, gently waking me from a deep sleep. It had been a long time since I had slept so soundly, without nightmares, without being startled by Derek's snoring or my mother-in-law's nightly coughing fits demanding water. I stretched, inhaling deeply the scent of lemongrass that filled the luxurious hotel room. A feeling of lightness and energy filled my body, like when I was 19, before I fell into the vicious cycle of my unhappy marriage. I got up leisurely, freshened up, and put on an elegant beige silk dress. Heading down to the hotel restaurant for breakfast, I chose a table by the window with a view of the calm lake. Sipping a hot black coffee, I scrolled through the morning news on my phone. When I opened the local news feed, a viral video with a screaming headline immediately caught my eye. Family causes disturbance in lobby of luxury building, assaults security and resists police. I took a sip of coffee and calmly pressed play. The video, filmed by one of the residents, showed my mother-in-law, Susan, with disheveled hair, screaming hysterically and writhing on the floor in front of the security desk at the Riverside Terrace. She was spewing insults at the building management and scratching a young security guard. Derek's younger brother, Paul, his face red from alcohol, was trying to throw a plastic chair at the reception desk. Derek was frantically trying to calm them down, but to no avail. The relatives from West Virginia were grabbing their things in a panic and scattering. At the end of the video, with sirens wailing, 2 police cars pulled up to the entrance. Police officers quickly subdued Susan and Paul and took everyone involved to the station for disturbing the peace at night. Payback had come surprisingly quickly. Just yesterday evening, they were full of arrogance, believing they had the right to control others' destinies, trampling on the law and human dignity. And now, they had to spend the night in a police station. This disgrace would undoubtedly stay with them for the rest of their lives. I turned off my phone. My soul was as calm as the surface of the lake. I didn't gloat, nor did I pity them. To me, They were now just strangers paying the price for their greed and cruelty. After breakfast, I drove straight to the main bank branch. Yesterday, I had only requested an emergency freeze on the accounts. Today, I needed to completely close all the old accounts to permanently cut off any possibility for them to use loopholes to withdraw money. The bank employee, after carefully checking my documents, quickly executed all the operations in the system. All supplementary cards in Derek's name, all the joint savings accounts from which he had stolen, were permanently blocked and deleted. I had just left the bank when my phone rang. It was my lawyer, Mr. Sullivan. His voice today sounded cheerful and confident. "Hello, Miss Miller. I'm calling to give you two important pieces of news. First, the motion to freeze the assets that I filed yesterday was accepted and urgently approved by the court this morning. Derek Orlov will no longer be able to move any assets. Second, and most importantly, the private investigators I hired have gathered evidence photos and bank statements confirming that Derek Orlov has been secretly supporting a young mistress in a rented apartment in Queens for almost 2 years. He paid for all her rent and expensive purchases with his salary card, while telling you that his company was losing money to avoid contributing to the family budget." I froze, gripping the phone tightly. Supporting a mistress. It turned out this man's depravity wasn't limited to obeying his mother and stealing money from his wife for his brother. He was also brazenly cheating on me. For those 2 years when he was supposedly away on business trips, when he refused intimacy under the pretext of being tired, all that time he was spending his energy and money on another woman. Disgust rose in my throat, but my strong mind immediately suppressed it. This evidence was the perfect final blow. I took a deep breath and answered the lawyer in a completely calm tone. "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Please prepare this case meticulously. Adultery and the use of marital funds to support a mistress are gross violations of the family code. I want him to return every dollar he spent inappropriately. We will meet in court as the undisputed winners." After hanging up, I hadn't even reached the parking lot when my phone rang again. It was Anthony from the real estate agency. His voice was buzzing with excitement. "Miss Miller, happy holidays. We've already found a buyer for your apartment. They've put down a deposit. We're just waiting for your decision on the date for signing the contract and handover. It's a married couple who just returned from abroad. They loved the location and the design of the apartment. They're ready to buy at your price with a 100% cash payment. No mortgage. The main thing is to get the deal done this week. Please come to the office to sign the preliminary agreement." Good news kept pouring in, and my spirits soared. I immediately drove to the agency. All the formalities were handled quickly and clearly. Holding a deposit check for a significant sum, I realized I had finally broken free from a place full of painful memories. After receiving the money, I didn't delay. I asked Anthony to find me another apartment. My requirements were simple. Not too large, 1 bedroom, but on a high floor with good security. And most importantly, with a view of the river. Anthony turned out to be a true professional. That same evening, he showed me an apartment on the 20th floor that perfectly met my expectations. Standing on the spacious, wind-swept balcony and looking at the calm flow of the river in the sunset, I agreed to the purchase without hesitation. This would be my new nest, where there would be no room for lies and tears. The following days flew by in pleasant activities. I entrusted all the real estate paperwork to Anthony. The rest of my time I dedicated to my father's shop. I quit my old job, determined to be the master of my own life. Uncle Andrew helped me clear out the space. I drew up the design plan myself. The old walls were painted a warm cream color. The antique wooden shelves were transformed into huge, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. I ordered simple wooden furniture, potted green plants, and warm lighting. I would open a bookstore cafe where people who love peace and quiet could have a cup of fragrant tea, read a good book, and rest from the hustle and bustle. This had been my dream as a young girl. A dream I had to put aside while trying to be a good wife and daughter-in-law. Now, I was building it from scratch with my own hands. The week of waiting passed in a flash. This morning, the sky over the city was clear and cloudless. The golden rays of the sun fell on the steps of the city courthouse, their warmth dispelling the cold of the past winter. I was dressed in a light blue business suit, my hair neatly tied in a bun, my makeup understated but emphasizing my determination. I walked up the stairs proudly and confidently. Beside me walked my lawyer, Mr. Sullivan, with his briefcase full of irrefutable evidence, confident and unflappable. A solemn silence reigned in the courtroom. Derek Orlov's family was already there. When I saw them, I hardly recognized them. In just a week, they had changed beyond recognition. Derek was in a crumpled shirt, unshaven, with deep dark circles under his eyes, which were full of despair. Susan sat on a bench for the public. She had aged 10 years. Her hair had visibly grayed. Her face was ashen and haggard. The arrest, the need to run around borrowing money for a lawyer, it had all drained the last of their strength. Paul and Kate were nowhere to be seen. Probably scared of a confrontation over the $25,000, they had hidden somewhere. The hearing began under the direction of a stern judge. When it was time for the arguments, Mr. Sullivan stood up and delivered his speech loudly and clearly. He systematically presented the evidence of my premarital property, the deed of title, my father's will. Derek's lawyer tried to object, claiming that Derek had invested money in renovations and furniture and demanded a share. But Mr. Sullivan immediately presented bank statements, proving that all expenses were paid from my personal credit card and salary. Derek had not a single transfer to confirm his contribution. The climax was the discussion of the division of marital property. The statement of the $25,000 transfer to Kate's account was laid on the court's table, along with the audio recording of the mother and son's conversation at the restaurant. The judge frowned and sternly questioned Derek about his deliberate diversion of assets. Derek stammered, sweat pouring down his face. He couldn't provide any coherent explanation, and the final, decisive blow was struck when Mr. Sullivan presented the court with evidence of Derek's adultery. Photos of him embracing his young mistress at the entrance of her rented apartment, receipts for jewelry and expensive clothes purchased with his salary card, everything was laid out on the table. A murmur went through the courtroom. Susan, sitting in the audience, gasped and clutched her heart. She had always been proud of her decent and exemplary son, and now the truth, revealed before everyone, had robbed her of her last support. Derek was completely crushed. His knees trembled. He buried his head in the table and sobbed. All his excuses were shattered by the ironclad evidence. After deliberation, the judge loudly read the verdict. Thanks to the compelling evidence, the law was on my side. The court granted my petition for divorce. As for the property, the apartment and the commercial space were declared my personal property. The court ordered Derek Orlov to return the $25,000 he had arbitrarily transferred to his brother, as well as to reimburse all funds spent on supporting his mistress. As for the remaining joint savings, given Derek's gross violation of marital fidelity, psychological abuse, and diversion of assets, the court ruled that I would receive 80% of the amount, and Derek only Yrmiercent. Additionally, he was ordered to pay me a large sum in compensation for moral damages. I had won a brilliant, unconditional victory. No mercy for those who deliberately destroyed someone else's life. Leaving the courthouse, I squinted in the bright sun. The free, clean air filled my lungs. Mr. Sullivan congratulated me and left. I lingered on the steps, watching the bustling traffic. Suddenly, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. I turned around. Derek was running toward me, stumbling. His eyes were red and swollen, his shoulders slumped. He looked pathetic. He stopped 2 steps away from me. His lips trembled in a last attempt to fix something. Grace, I've lost everything. I have nowhere to live. I have no money. They found out about the scandal at work and are going to fire me. My mom was just taken to the hospital with a hypertensive crisis. I'm begging you, for old time's sake, at least forgive me the compensation. I'm on the edge. I looked directly into the desperate eyes of the man who was once my husband. His cowardice was repulsive. Even at the last moment, he could only beg for mercy instead of manfully accepting the consequences of his actions. I shook my head. My face was as cold as ice. The verdict has been handed down. That is my money, earned with my sweat and blood, and I will not give up a single cent. This is the path you and your mother chose for yourselves. When you were planning to exploit me and rob me of my father's inheritance, did you ever think that I might be on the edge? Pay your debts, Derek. Live well. And I advise you not to ruin any other woman's life. With that, I turned decisively and walked away. I never looked back. His desperate cry was drowned out by the noise of the city. I walked to my car and got behind the wheel. The car moved smoothly. I turned on the music, and a cheerful spring melody filled the car. I confidently stepped on the gas, and the car sped forward, leaving the darkness of the past behind. The pain, the tears, and the betrayers. Ahead was the bridge over the river. My cozy apartment on the 20th floor, flooded with light, and my bookstore cafe, waiting to be opened. The bright sun shone through the windshield, reflecting the face of a strong, free, and happy woman. My new life was beginning at this very moment. Leaving behind the court's verdict, and those who were paying for their boundless greed, I drove toward the light. A woman's fate ultimately depends on herself. To endure cruelty is to be cruel to oneself. Sacrifices are valuable only when they are justified, and true happiness begins the moment we find the courage to let go of the past in order to love ourselves.